in short-term and long-term history, Republicans have not been friends of the working class, but a lot of people are so fed up from Democratic, I think, more slogans than action that they would be open to voting Republican.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that there is this domino effect that's happening.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio,
Tumwa, Iowa.
Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. Hey, it's Jordan. We are in Milwaukee, specifically at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee campus, where there is a massive truck outside with Kamala Harris's image on it. So I think this area of students would probably lean more towards the Democrats. But before we get to the election, I'm with Mia. You're a longtime activist here and born and raised in Milwaukee. I wanted to talk to you because I feel like the media focuses on the polls and the horse race, not so much like what the actual issues are in these states. So you've been, fighting the good fight for a while. Tell me what's going on in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, that perhaps people don't know about.
I think that knocking on doors, there is this separation between what's happening and the conversations that are happening in some media and what people are needing on the ground, right? So people are concerned, with winter coming up in Wisconsin, they're concerned about their being able to get to work, right? They're concerned about being able to get that next check, to get food, childcare, and stuff like that. And I think that these issues, these everyday issues, if you will, just aren't necessarily being highlighted on this national front as our, the candidates go back to back. And so I think that more now than ever, I'm hearing more of those concerns of, yes, that, but how does this impact my day-to-day and why is this relevant to me?
And I think there's basically been a 20 to 30 year inflation. It's called gentrification, i.e. economic terrorism, as I like to call it. So obviously people are focused on the grocery prices and other things, but I mean, Milwaukee, like Detroit, like Cleveland, like Philly, like a gazillion cities.
Yeah.
It's been significantly gentrified in the last decade.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that, in Milwaukee, we are still struggling with, we're one of the most segregated cities, right? So there are spaces that are food deserts, right? And on top of having to deal with inflation, we're dealing with the distance to get to the food, to pay for overpriced food. With gentrification, we are finding now more than ever that there is a housing issue and folks moving in and folks moving out and not having stable places to stay. And there are a lack thereof of spaces for folks to stay in the temporary. So, relying on hotels, family members and such like that, these real life situations that people are dealing with just aren't being, highlighted in the way that I would appreciate them being highlighted.
And I mean, I don't need to get into the Republicans. They're not the answer. But frankly, Democrats run places like Milwaukee, and there's been a lot of gentrification. There's been a lot of, kind of giving tax breaks to real estate developers, et cetera. Increased police budgets, not as much in terms of, investment in working class people, healthcare, education's been cut.
Yes.
Can you kind of talk about that's kind of lopsided?
Yeah, we are having several groups in Milwaukee right now that are working on giving testimony to the city budget, the county budget. There is obviously, as you've kind of spoken to just now, a need for those budgets to reflect the needs of the constituents, quite frankly. And we are seeing there's this tension point. There's always been this tension point, but now, especially with this election, especially who's on the ballot, up and down the ballot, we are seeing this these conversations being centered in a different way, if you will, where it is now, there's folks that are coming out and voting and engaging in these conversations a lot more than what I have seen or what I'm used to in the past couple of years, which is exciting. And it also brings forth a bunch of people that, and highlighting the variety of people that are still going through these things that you wouldn't even think are going through these things, right? That,
when we're told the economy is great.
Right, exactly. So I think, and I'm excited to see, and I'm part of this really big push for there to be more say and more of a look at the actual constituents that are being impacted by these budgets than them being on this political. It's politics. It's just what that they do. People are tired of that, and it's being seen by the testimony and the backlash that other elected officials are experiencing right now.
I was just in Detroit. I walked into the historic King Solomon Church. Martin Luther King gave his original I Have a Dream speech there. Yep. Malcolm X was there. And I spoke with two older African-American women. If you would have asked me to bet money, I would have said they were strong Kamala Harris supporters, and they are Trump curious now.
It's not going to get any better under the Democrats, because we've been had them for, I know, 20-something years. And I haven't seen anything. I lived through right to work. I done lived through the riot. I done lived through all of the police brutality in the city of Detroit. And all of this was under Democrats, so.
So are you feeling for yourself that you would consider Trump, or?
I would consider.
And if you have the choice of the lesser evil, to me, evil is evil.
Yeah.
Because frankly, a lot of, not just black voters, but in the black community, it's not so much they like Trump, they're just tired of broken promises from local Democrats, state Democrats. They're tired of being told, well, you must, because we must stop this Republican. A few people I spoke with said, well, yeah, I see the politicians election year and then they go away. I venture to guess there's a lot of people similar frustrations here.
Yeah, I think that it's important to highlight that the Black community is a monolith, but what we are experiencing and continue to experience is economic injustice, right? And so there are, you've seen the targeted ads, you've heard the conversations of one side, maybe more so trying to put that at the forefront of, we're going to promise economic injustice or economic justice, and there's going to be, there's money here, there's opportunity here. And you hear that a lot from the Democratic side and a lot from the different candidates, elected officials, but maybe folks aren't necessarily cued into that process or how things work in actuality versus what you've said, right? Those empty promises. And so from the conversations that I'm having in the Black community, I feel like more folks feel that their trials and tribulations that they're going through will be lessened significantly and at a faster degree if they are voting for the other side. People are tired. They're tired of hearing the same thing. And I think that right now we're seeing this tension of people willing to sacrifice what they truly believe in, maybe, call it morals, call aspirations, whatever you will, to maybe vote for a different way because they feel like they are going to be better off because they're seeing people, or there's this perception that they would be better off.
Which I should put a public service announcement. Sorry, MAGA, if you're watching. It ain't going to be better under Trump. It's just not. He's going to give tax breaks to his friends, rich people. Most of the things he did in office were tax cuts for the rich and crumbs for you. You might have saw a little tax cut, but it wasn't anything compared to the champagne and cake the rich had. With that said, that says something that, in short-term and long-term history, Republicans have not been friends of the working class, but a lot of people are so fed up from Democratic, I think, more slogans than action that they would be open to voting Republican.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that there is this domino effect that's happening, like I said earlier, with these overarching themes and things that we're talking about in politics. We're talking about healthcare, we're talking about abortion care, we're talking about workers' rights. People aren't seeing how that trickles down to their day-to-day. But they are feeling or being connected to the different messaging from the other side of how this is going to impact them day-to-day.
Have you found that a lot of folks, because, whether it be working multiple jobs or high grocery prices or whatever it is, that they're more susceptible to this anti-immigrant message?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, one, there's misinformation or disinformation, right, that is happening that people don't know to necessarily explore or research. So it's not about there has to be somebody to blame, right? We've seen it in history time and time again. It's the simple science that we have now in politics where there needs to be somebody to blame. And historically, it has been a minority group, the person, the lesser population, the people that are not from here, right? And so this just happens to be an immigration, a border crisis is what I keep hearing it being coined as, because there needs to be somebody to blame. And of course, there is no space being made to have conversations of how these things are actually, how these things actually work, right? When we kind of follow where the money goes and follow who's in charge of this inflation, follow who voted this way and who voted that way. There's no spaces to be created for that. So instead we have to put the blame somewhere.
Because there's plenty of reporting and research to show the majority of this inflation is price gouging.
Yeah.
This company's price gouging. It has
Correct.
nothing to do with immigrants, nothing to do with migrants. I'm not saying the border is perfect. With that said, I mean, most of the jobs migrants and immigrants takes are jobs Americans do not want to do. Mm-hmm. And most of the jobs that are people are losing is because our Congress allowed trade deals
Correct.
to send our jobs elsewhere.
Correct.
And that's Democrats and Republicans.
Yes.
So can you kind of talk about, we know in Michigan, the Arab American population has been talked about in terms of Gaza. That might hurt Harris. But I'm talking to people here. There's a decent Arab American population in Wisconsin as well. Mm-hmm. Have you heard this from voters as an issue in terms of Israel's onslaught in Gaza?
To be honest, at least me personally, in the conversations that I'm having, it's the most prominent. It's the make or break of who is voting for Kamala and who isn't, right?
And that's among all voters or just younger
younger voters,
okay.
I would say, younger activists that are getting their and I won't even say that, right? Because that's a huge generalization. People across the board that I'm talking to, this conversation has taken center of, well, what did she do? What could she do, right? And some of it's research, and some of it's going this back and forth, but it is a really pressing issue to people of how we as Americans, as a country, and how we, Wisconsin, as a state, engage in conflicts that are not within our borders, and what that says about us as Americans and what we stand up for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an overarching theme.
Right. And obviously, there's been a lot of talk in the media about black men in particular. Obviously, you don't speak for black men,
Correct.
But in your conversations with black men, particularly in Milwaukee, mm-hmm. places that we know Hillary Clinton in 2016, a large reason she lost Wisconsin was she underperformed in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. She got less black voters than Obama did years before her. Are you seeing, depressed turnout or depressed enthusiasm? Because I've talked to different people, and some people say Milwaukee is strong for Harris.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to the spaces that you are in and the conversations that are being had. And I think that there's a lot of nuance within the Black community as far as culture goes, as far as the way that different folks see leadership and what's important to different folks on a cultural level, on a personal level. So it's hard for me to say, all, black men are feeling this way or that way, because when you're having a conversation with me as a queer Black woman about the Kamala, it might be different than some of the different community activists that I'm having conversations with. But I will say it really comes down to, doesn't come down to, but some of the different topics we're talking about is being tied into Black culture and history of speaking for the Black community and what that track record looks like before running and being endorsed by the Democratic Party. And I think it's things like that that are really important to the Black community that are not necessarily being highlighted in our media or on our national level. I think that one can say that, when we talk about Hillary, she thought she had it, so she didn't have to connect with the Black community that way, and the Black community.
Well, it might have helped if she came to Wisconsin.
Correct, exactly. Folks saw right through that, and folks, voting is the way that we use our voice in order to share our opinions about how we felt about somebody not visiting Wisconsin. And so I think it's a couple of different things that are at play, and it really depends on what the pockets that you're talking about. So I stray away from generalizations, because me, a 25-year-old Black woman who is very politically involved, and it's going to feel different than somebody who does not have the privilege to be as politically involved as I am.
Yeah. And it's also different by age. 'Cause,
Yes.
We know, just like the gap between white folks, older black voters tend to be, more vote for the Democrats, kind of that lesser of two evils,
Yeah.
where the generation gap, like under 40,
Yeah.
less so. A lot of black voters under 40 love Bernie as opposed to the older.
Great.
Can you talk about the police here? Because, I'm hearing that they're trying to increase the budget for police, and it's
Yes.
already nearly 50% of the budget.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the rationale for that
Yeah.
they're giving?
I'm not sure. But I can tell you that there is a lot of pushback. I think it really comes down to people's salaries. So it's kind of what I'm hearing, right? We've got to pay for people's salaries. We've got to pay for the different equipment that we're using at the police department. But what
The different militarized police equipment?
correct. But to what end, right? Like when we're thinking about the way that law enforcement has engaged with different constituents in Milwaukee and the different deaths that we've experienced, the different microaggressions that we've experienced. We are raising a budget for an entity in Milwaukee that tends to harm, and we're not holding them accountable. So why would we continue to raise a budget and give money to an entity that continues to harm, that's supposed to be keeping us safe, right? Yeah. Again, a very nuanced conversation, but maybe not so nuanced at the same time.
Do you feel like part of the problem with, it's not specific to Harris, because this is what Democrats do every election, but part of the problem is, whether people loved Bernie or not, people knew what he stood for. It was Medicare for all, it was free college. The policies were very in your face. Whereas Harris, she's talking about like tax credits, these kind of more small, I would call them smaller ball things. Do you think people feel like this is kind of too small, incremental stuff for the level of economic frustration?
Yes, I think that the feedback that I'm getting is that it seems like she's on the defense. When it all came out that Biden was stepping back and not running anymore, and endorsing and putting her forth, there was a lot of uneasiness of, okay, what is she actually running on? And I'm still hearing that feedback even after the conversation between her and the other candidate. People are still unsure of what she's foundationally running on, which is concerning, right?
Because you mean for the people's, not specific enough?
Right, yeah, right. So there's, but again, folks are wanting more real life, their personal day-to-day and how this election impacts them. Right. And they're just not feeling that.
Right. My last question, if Kamala Harris wins Wisconsin, what do you think would be the main reason? And if she loses?
That's a good question. I would have to say that I feel confident that if Kamala continues to connect with Wisconsin voters, continues to show the Black community the work that she has done for the Black community, the work that she will continue to do for the Black community. You see a lot of her ads about uplifting the middle class. Let's talk more about that, right? And how those different policies and things really relate to me, right? Break it down for me. I think that is going to be, of course, I'm all about grassroots, an advocate for grassroots strategies. So really getting in with the community and talking to stakeholders, right? Like instead of just being in political spaces. And if she loses, I think kind of what you were talking about, right? This appeal that folks are feeling from the other side of, okay, well, this is just going to fix our economic issues, or just feeling deflated and not encouraged to vote for the Democratic Party as a whole. What have they done for me in the past type thing? I think also, like when we talk about Wisconsin, there is Milwaukee and then there's the rest of Wisconsin. Right. And I think that we really need to take that into consideration. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like, in my personal opinion, Milwaukee holds and represents the rest of, right, that othered population. And so I think that also plays a really big factor into it.
Perfect example. We're driving through Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I see billboards. Kamala Harris supports raising the minimum wage.
Yeah.
To what?
Yeah, right. People want more conversation.
How are you going to do it?
Yeah.
I support, sunny days. But,
right, yeah.
So it just seems like there's a lot of poll-tested focus group stuff, but people need a little bit more meat on the bone, I guess you could say.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Longtime activist here. Awesome Barbie shirts too. And I will say, since we're in college, Professor Sheridan here will tell you your homework assignment. Status Coup, that is my handwriting, by the way. StatusCoup.com/join. Join, because we got to fund this on-the-ground reporting and travel, talking to the people, because I will venture to guess the mainstream media is not going around talking to the people about the core issues. And if they are, they're cutting it down to, if you're lucky, 10 to 15 second sound bites.